Okay, so where we left off last week was bottom of page 80. This paragraph at the bottom of page 80. We're starting to study step 9. And so how many pages did we get into here? From 72 to 80. So in 8 pages, we've already covered what? Step 5, 6, 7, 8, and already started on 9. That's a lot of information we got in those few amount of pages. And now we've got from 80 all the way to 88, another 8 pages. That is all about step 9. A lot of information about step 9, as it should be. And I want to kind of go back a little bit to what was mentioned in the opening remarks. Going back to the title page, what is Alcoholics Anonymous? The story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. The story of how. We're going to learn how lots of people did something, right? What did they do? They recovered. From what? A seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. We haven't found, if you're an alcoholic in here, chances are you probably have not found another solution. AA is usually not the first option that we go to. We usually try our own willpower first. And if that doesn't work, then we may look for an alternative solution. Well, that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is. We have a solution that we'll offer you that has worked for all of us. If you're interested, rarely has anyone failed to do it. So we're going to learn how in this book. And at our meetings, because the fellowship is also called Alcoholics Anonymous. We do the same thing. We teach how we recover. That's all we do. We don't have group therapy. We don't talk about our feelings and all that. That's not how we spend our time in our meetings. We teach how to recover. If you're not interested in that, then AA really has nothing to offer us. But focusing back on how, because that is really, I think, the linchpin of what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. And it was mentioned that how is an action word. So we're going to be learning about some actions that were taken by these people, right? Learning some actions. Well, that kind of makes sense and coincides with what we found in Forward to First Edition, that this is a textbook. What do you get out of a textbook? You learn how to do something, right? We're going to learn. We're going to take action from what we learn is the idea, but we're learning. So what kind of information, how, but we know we're going to learn how, and we know it's a textbook. Well, in a textbook, what kind of direction? Well, we know they give directions in a textbook, right? And when they give directions in a textbook, they generally don't leave it kind of open for you to figure out or just kind of skate around or just kind of give opinion or even like cliff notes as to how to do something. Now, what we do know is that they told us in Forward to First Edition, as far as the how, the second sentence in Forward to First Edition, and this one is the sentence that has the italicized words in it. And it says that they're going to show other alcoholics precisely how they have recovered. So they've expanded upon that. Not only are we going to learn how, we're going to learn with precision, right? And then we follow that up again on page 29, just in case we haven't got the message yet. Top page 29 says further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. So when they talk about how, they're talking about we are going to learn precise, clear-cut directions in this book of how to recover. And we've mentioned this many times before, but I think it's important when we're getting into step 9 to understand that, because my God, well, I think we've done a page and a half or so of step 9. And those that were here last week, I mean, did we not see very clear-cut directions about some clear-cut examples of how we take care of these things? Because step 9 is about making amends, right? That's what it says up here anyway. It talks about making amends, which is the same as making restitution, which is the same as reparations. Those are all meaning the same thing. How do I know that? Because this morning I looked up a word, reparations. Why did I look up the word reparations? Because if we back up one page to 79, they don't talk about making amends. They use the word reparations. In the first full paragraph, they say, although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. So they're talking about reparations. What's the difference between a reparation and an amend? That's what went into my mind this morning. See, I'm still learning this stuff too. So I look up reparations. What does reparations mean? How did I get onto a different word? Okay, it says the act of making amends. Sounds like it means the same thing. Or giving satisfaction for a wrong or injury. giving satisfaction. Does that say giving an apology? No. Well, let's look at subsection B that gives another example. It says something done or given as amends or satisfaction. Talking about equal restitution, making right what we have wronged to the best of our ability. That's what we're looking to do with reparations, amends, or restitutions. So it says that they take innumerable forms. That really outlines step 9. When you get into making your 5th step list, and now you got your 8-step list of the amends you make, there's generally going to be just all sorts of different things, just all sorts of different things that we've all gone through where we've hurt other people, innumerable forms. So how do you get clear-cut directions on how to take care of every single example of what's been wrong? That becomes a question. Where's the clear-cut directions on that? Go back to that paragraph, first paragraph in 79. Although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. So what are the principles they're talking about? Our guiding principles here? Well, let's see. The first thing it says is that right after that sentence, reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience. Might need to remind ourselves of that if we don't want to do some of these amends. We've decided we're going to go to any lengths. What does it say? We ask. Do we remember what the word ask means that we've read over and over? Pray. We're asking God, right? We ask that we be given the strength and direction to do the right thing. That sounds like a general principle. If I don't know how to make an amend about something, what's the first thing we can do here? We ask God to give us the strength and the direction to do the right thing. Give me the willingness and show me what I need to do, no matter what the personal consequences may be. It's a tough one to choke down, but that's a guiding principle, no matter what the reparation is. We flip over to page 80 at the top. It says, before taking drastic action which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. There's another guiding principle. Before we involve somebody else in their amends and go and release names, we need to make sure that they're okay with it. Well, how would we know if they're okay with it? We probably want to ask them. That's right. We probably want to ask them. And the next guiding principle is if we've obtained permission, number 1. 2, we've consulted with others. Sounds like sometimes we may need to be consulting with others. A mentor is a great person to consult with, but it doesn't have to be. But consult with others before we make these amends. And then we've asked for God's help, which later, it doesn't say it right here, but later it's going to tell us that while we do ask others, okay, and we do ask for God's help, God is the one who becomes the judge. That is the final decision. But we do consult others. And 3, it says that we ask to have God's help. We've got all 3 of those things. What's the next general guiding principle? The drastic step, if it's indicated, we must not shrink. Must means must, right? Doesn't sound like there's any other options. That's what it is. And notice it says must not shrink. What do they mean by shrink? If we're shrinking, what does that mean? That means fear. We have fear. And didn't we see that that fear is that evil corroding thread and our existence is shot through with it, sets forth trains of circumstances that bring us misfortune? We must live without fear. So we must not shrink at anything. And when we go back to, if you guys remember in the 4th step, learn about fear, it also told us what we do about fear. How do we get rid of fear? It says we ask God to remove it. And how long does it take? It says that we commence to outgrow fear immediately. Okay, so if I'm fearful, I remind myself I said I'm going to go to any lengths to do this. I ask God for not only the direction of what I need to do, but 2, for the strength to do it if I'm not willing. Got to ask. This is dependence upon God, right? What did Bill say? Of myself, I'm nothing. I realized of myself, I'm nothing. I'm just weak trying to grasp and try to hang on in this world and just terrorizing the world as I'm doing it. I need help. Going back to not drinking, but in the 1st step, part 2, that's the problem. My life is unmanageable when managed by me. So what we're looking to do here, if you remember, if we go back to page 77, as we started this journey talking about step 9, in the 3rd line down, first full sentence says, actually, hang on, let's just go to the top of it. at the moment, second full sentence on 77. At the moment, we're trying to put our lives in order, right? So in step 9, we're trying to put our lives in order. And if you remember on page XVIII in the, or I'm sorry, XXVIII in the doctor's opinion, the doctor said in nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than ourselves if they are to recreate their lives. Right now, we're trying to put our lives in order. We are trying to recreate our lives. And says, going back to the doctor's opinion, in order to do that, our ideals must be grounded in a power greater than ourselves. So that's why we had step 3 and step 2 to get that underway. But that's what we learned from the doctor. If you want to recreate your life, you're going to need God's help. Here now it's saying, at the moment, right now, as we're starting step 9, at the moment, we're trying to put our lives in order. It says, but that's not the end. It's not just about getting my life in order. It's not just about making my life manageable from step 1. I would underline where it says our real purpose now. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That is going to be the true recreation of our lives. So that's our goal now. That's what we're trying to do now. So to put all that in perspective, let's go back to page 80 and see what kind of other clear-cut directions we can get here. We stopped at the bottom of page 80, even though we had a few minutes left, because this gets into a whole nother discussion. The first sentence says, the chances are we have domestic troubles. Do you think? Do we have anybody have domestic troubles when they got here? Where did we find that at? You remember on page 52? The second full paragraph on 52. In the second paragraph, they give us some examples of what we learned from step 1. Because when you read step 1 up here on the board, it says that our lives had become unmanageable. That's what I want to focus on. We're not focusing on the drinking issue. Remember, we're done with that. Our lives have become unmanageable. Well, what defines an unmanageable life? What does unmanageable mean? Well, here they give us some examples. It says we had to ask ourselves, why shouldn't we apply our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view? We were having, number 1, unmanageable life. We were having trouble with our personal relationships. 2, we couldn't control our emotional natures. Anybody experienced any of this stuff? We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. And 8, we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. That's 8 examples they're giving of an unmanageable life. And all it takes is if you can identify with one, that's an unmanageable life. Let's go back to the first one. We were having troubles with our personal relationships. Page 80, chances are we have domestic troubles. So we're going to number 1 right off the bat. That's generally the biggest thing. It's generally the biggest thing is problems with the people closest to us, right? So this is a big discussion. Perhaps we're mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if, in this respect, alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. It's a form of selfishness. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? The husband begins to feel lonely and sorry for himself. Self-pity, form of selfishness, sorry for himself. So what does he do when he feels sorry for himself? He takes care of himself. He commences to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. Perhaps he's having a secret and exciting affair with, quote, the girl who understands. In fairness, we must say that she may understand. But what are we going to do about such a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he's married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. Now, this is a real key point here, because this is obviously something that comes up a lot. I have seen come up a lot. And when you go back to page 80, remember it says before you implicate somebody else, secure their consent. And we talked even about it last week. I've seen it happen many times when somebody confronts or going to make their amends to their spouse or loved one or whatever and declare that they've had an affair. And what 9 times out of 10 is the first thing out of the other one's mouth? It is not Okay, I forgive you. That's usually not the first thing. Usually the first thing is who? Who? Who is it? That's why it goes back to we need to secure their consent. So let's see what they got to say about it, because it says here we're going to have to do something about this. If we're sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? That's always the number one question. Because remember, we've also read elsewhere, and I think we read it again somewhere where it says we can't save our skins at the expense of somebody else. Now, I'm going to hurt you like hell, but boy, I'm glad I got that off my chest. Now I'm free. We can't do that. But that can also be an excuse to say, well, I can't tell her because if I do, I'm going to hurt her. So now I can evade it. We don't want to do that either. So, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. Well, there's a clear-cut direction. Undoubtedly. That means no doubt about it. We need to admit this. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. Remember, this is your amendment. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. Underline, more than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Sounds like a clear-cut direction. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we've often found this the best course to take. Our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. There it is. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider, get this? No outsider. If you're working with somebody, you're an outsider. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Would underline this. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. There's a good direction. I'm thinking about your happiness. Think about it. I'm trying to save my skin, and you're upset because of what happened. You're thinking about you and your feelings. I'm thinking about me and my feelings. What that sentence states is, think about the other person's happiness, and they think about your happiness. What can go wrong there? Right? Keep it always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk a face-to-face combat. Okay, so if we have no such complications, there is still plenty we should do at home. Sometimes, love this, sometimes we hear an alcoholic say the only thing he needs to do is to keep sober. Certainly he must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But what do we learn about just being sober? It's just a beginning. And actually, we're restless, irritable, and discontent. We're miserable. Is that all we need to do is keep sober? The underline, he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patience mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today and would perhaps be dead. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead, and affections have been uprooted. Would underline this. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. It's a great statement to go by. I can tell you so many times working with a new person, and as they're just starting to go through this process, and the first thing that we try to advise them based on what the book says is we don't want them to be resentful because that's going to kill them faster than anything. So in other words, you start getting attacked by your spouse or whatever, do not engage. Run. Because that getting resentful is what's going to kill you. So we don't want that to happen. But here, what it's telling us is this is the next thing to keep in mind. If your home at any point is in turmoil, what has got it that way? Selfish and inconsiderate habits. I might need to look at me whenever my home life starts turning into turmoil. Is there any selfish and inconsiderate habits? That's what keeps it that way. Nothing to do with drinking. So therefore, we feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. So hopefully in that explanation, everybody here who has heard this, we don't have any unthinkers here. I want everybody to be thinkers. Unthinkers think that sobriety is enough. That is not the case. He's like the farmer who came up of his cyclone cellar to find the home ruined. To his wife, he remarks, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" Yes, there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. You get that? Didn't we learn maybe a couple of weeks ago how long did it take to recover? I think when we got on page 567, it says that it can happen in a matter of months, sometimes even weeks to recover. But this recreation of our lives says here, there's a long period of construction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fit the bill at all. Got that? It's not about apologies. It's about equal restitution. So what do we do with the family? Here's our directions for the family. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it. Meaning, what was I like as we now see it? You've already done your fifth step and your fourth step. So you already know what selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the house in turmoil of your own. That's what we're going to analyze. And we're going to be very careful not to criticize them. It's nothing to do with them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partially responsible. So we clean house with the family. Oh, here's some more directions. Asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. If you're asking for that every morning as you're going through step 9, God, show me the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love to my family, chances are I won't be having as many selfish and inconsiderate habits. And notice they use the word habits. Selfish and inconsiderate habits. You know what a habit is? A habit is a repeated pattern of the mind that's built up over a long time. The only thing that's going to break that habit is going to be God, dependence on God. Show me first thing in the morning, as my mentor used to say, before you go inflicting yourself on the world, how about taking a minute in the morning and ask this? Show me the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. Because chances are I'm not going to have it all the time, especially if I feel somebody's attacking me and I'm wronged and I get into my self-pity. So we got to ask God for this. This spiritual life that we're talking about, it's not a theory, right? It's based on their experience. And we have to live it. Notice that's all in italics. I don't know whenever I've seen the laminated version of the promises, because this is the first sentence they use in the promises. I don't know if I've ever seen it in italics right there. But remember, italics means it's very important. We have to live it. This is a way of living. It must be lived, not just talked about. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not urge them. Well, there's another direction. Now, we know we read in Forward to First Edition, that our way of living has its advantages for all. And we also read in the doctor's opinion that among the first more than 100 that were the authors, the basis was of these men and their families were doing this, right? But notice here, it's saying that if they don't want it, don't urge them to. And I will show you that within myself, this is a very clear-cut direction that I've had to live up to because my wife has nothing to do with this. Nothing. She respects what I do and my time in it, but this is not her way of living. Made that very clear. I don't urge it. And it seems to have worked itself out. May have taken longer than possibly it could have if she would have taken this route, but it doesn't matter. This is the way God has led it, and maybe at some point it may change. I don't know. But the point is we don't urge it, right? We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior is what's going to convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. Do you think? There may be some wrongs that can never fully be right. Okay? We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. So there's another enumerable form. What if it's something that can't be done? So what is an example of something that can't be done? amend that can't be made. Well, what if the person's dead? How do you make an amends to that? Right? I mean, there's a lot of forms, but that's what they're talking about here. What if it can't be done? It tells us you don't worry about it as long as you can honestly say that you'd write them if you could. That's what you honestly feel, then you have done what you could. However, so some people cannot be seen. Okay, that would be if they're dead or maybe they moved far away. And what does it say? We send them an honest letter. So if we can do something, we do something. And there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. That's the direction. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anything. It's a good point there, too. Do not allow this to happen. If you're going to make an amends to somebody and all they want to do is just clobber you over the head, we're not going to be servile or scraping. We do not crawl before it. I'm here to make my amends. That's it. If you don't want it, I've done my part and I walk away from it. I don't, oh, but I'm so sorry. Don't let that happen. Right? We don't crawl before anyone. And now here goes the next part. It's interesting to me how when you read the promises at meetings, they use that sentence on the paragraph before, and then it stops and then it picks up down here. So what we're going to find in the promises, those of you who've gone to other meetings probably heard the promises read a million times. But what are they? And what do they mean? And what are they explaining? Those are good questions, right? Well, first off, where are we at in our reading right now? What step are we around? Around step 9. So in context, when we're reading the promises, when should these happen? Around step 9. Do they tell you that in the reading? No. Tell you that in the directions. We are around step 9. What are they explaining to us? They're going to explain to us, this is very interesting, especially as we get into the next page. We're going to learn about 2 different things. And this has just dawned on me recently because I'm constantly thinking about this stuff. But when you look at step 1, I always like to see that and it's separated by a hyphen. So we're looking at 2 different things. One is our powerlessness over alcohol, right? But the second piece of it is our lives are jacked up. Those are 2 different things, right? So in the first 3 chapters in the doctor's opinion, all we learned is about the powerlessness over alcohol. Didn't talk much other than we need to recreate our lives. Other than that, they didn't talk a whole lot about anything else other than why we're powerless, why we can't, and all that. But we're powerless, okay? And then we're talking about our lives. So we know that we were powerless. We would drink no matter what, basically. And when we started drinking, couldn't control the amount we took. And also our lives are very unmanageable, which we know now is due to what? Selfishness and self-centeredness, which is the root of our troubles. That's why we're restless, irritable, and discontent. How are we living? Restless, irritable, discontent, full of fear, remorse, guilt. Oh, that's how we were living. When we look at this part in the promises, they don't talk about what happens with the drinking when we recover. What I'm going to tell you, and we'll see this in the next page, they're starting to explain what happens when you have a spiritual experience. We went through all these innumerable forms of reparations. And what they're talking about here, and they'll tell us in a minute, is that halfway through step 9, you should have recovered by this point. You should have had a spiritual experience by this point. This is the last goalpost. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen until then. They're like, it better have happened by then, or you've missed something. Okay. So what we're going to be seeing here in the promises is this tells us the second part here. If we're different now, what's different? Is our life now manageable? And are we still restless, irritable, and discontent? How are we feeling? And then what we're going to take a look at on the next page is what happened with the drink problem. So right here, we're looking at the unmanageability problem. So I want to read the promises and tell me, based on how we felt before with this restless, irritable, discontentedness, misery, all these problems that piled up on us and became astonishingly difficult to solve. Now you're doing step 9, and it says we're painstaking about this phase of our development. What phase? Step 9. If we're painstaking about it, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. When? Does it say when we're done with step 9? It says when we're halfway through step 9, we'll be amazed. So what happens? We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. Well, didn't it say back on page 52 with our unmanageable life that we were unhappy? Well, now we're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We're not going to regret the past, and we're not going to wish to shut the door on it. We're going to comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. Nothing about drinking. This is how we're feeling, how our life is like after we recover. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we'll see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Why would that be? Well, selfishness was our problem, root problem. And didn't it say that our new purpose was to what? Be of maximum benefit to God and those about us? That's how we lose interest in selfish things and start gaining interest in our fellows. Self-seeking, it's just going to slip away. We don't even try to change it. It's going to slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. New ideas, emotions, and attitudes will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. Remember, our problems had piled up on us and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Now, we intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. And then we suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. We tried to make our lives manageable, and we couldn't get this. God is going to be the one who has done this. Are these extravagant promises? That's a great question, too, because if you're somebody who believes that you've recovered, it's a great thing to look these things over and say, am I feeling this? Is this how I feel? Is this how I'm really living? Or does this look really disconnected from where I'm at in life? And if so, why? Well, at this point, if you've actually done all the way through step 9 properly, then it probably has something to do with not keeping in close contact with God, asking for his direction, trying to perform it well, and working with others. You know, I go back to something I heard Alan, the guy who will be speaking here next week for you guys from Florida. He had said, I went to one of his meetings a couple of weeks ago, and he had said that we had the same mentor. And he had told him, he'd asked, like, how do I know when I've recovered? How do I know when that happened? Now, it'd be easy to point to this, but he's asking, you know, my mentor didn't point him to this. You know, he said, well, I'll know when you recovered as soon as I see you working with other people. You ain't working with other people. You must not have recovered yet. You still don't seem to think that you need to be of maximum benefit to God and the people about you. Not doing step 12. That's it. You want to know if you recovered? You're working with other people? Clear-cut answer. Very clear. So are they extravagant promises? Well, in their experience, they think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but they will always, I'd underline the word always means without fail. They'll always materialize if we work for them. End of step 9. The last context we got in there is halfway through step 9, right? Said that's when this was going to happen. They didn't go on and say, okay, we're done with step 9. They left us hanging halfway through step 9, showing you've had a spiritual experience and this is what it feels like. Well, how do I know they're saying they had a spiritual experience? Well, let's read on. It says this thought now brings us to step 10, which suggests that we're going to continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. That is the AA way of living. The steps 4 through 9 that we do one time, and they are one-off. How do I know that? Because they never tell us to do it again. Do you know why you ever hear anybody mean say, you know what? It might be because of the way they're feeling or whatever. I don't know. But they'll say, you know, I got to go back and do a 4-step again. Well, according to this, you should never have to do that if you're doing step 10, because you are going to continue taking personal inventory and you're going to continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. And it says we understand what vigorously means, right? We vigorously commenced this way of living. What way of living? Taking inventory, setting right to any new mistakes. We're going to vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. Circle that word as. Remember we found on page 44, there were 2 questions to ask whether you're an alcoholic, and they were right in between them was the word or, which meant all you got to answer yes to is one or the other. That one little word with 2 letters made a big difference. Well, the 2 little letters here, don't miss that. As. When do we start commencing this way of life? As we're doing step 9, not after. We start doing step 9, we're cleaning up all the past. And as we're cleaning up the past, we're going to be setting right any wrongs that we're going through right now. Because how long could it take to repair the past? Didn't we just see that it's a long reconstruction ahead? It could take a while to do these. If we're not keeping it straight, and it could take 6 months or 9. You could have a whole new slew of things that you need to go back and do a 4-step on. So if you're not doing this every day, living this as a way of living, then of course you're going to have stuff build up. So this is saying step 10, we're not going to build up this laundry list again that we had from selfishness running our lives for all these years. Once we start making those amends immediately, this is the only step that I know of that you're doing 2 at the same time. And actually, we're going to be finding that we're going to be doing 4 at the same time. All of them are in order. But right here at step 9, it says, as we're doing step 9, we're starting step 10. And you're going to see, as we're doing step 9 and 10, we're doing 11. And as we're doing step 9 and 10, 11, we're doing 12. The AA way of life is 10, 11, and 12. The lead up from 1 through 9 is to become recovered. 10, 11, and 12 is our way of living that keeps us that way. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's what we're looking at. Yeah, I got a couple more minutes here. So let's look at these directions for step 10. We've entered the world of the spirit. Our next function, we got a new function, is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. And this is not an overnight matter. This is not a step that's a one-off. It should continue for how long? Our lifetime. That's why it's a way of living. So now our directions. This is what we're going to watch for. It said we're going to take personal inventory. It says we're going to continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Those 4 things, as we're going through our lives every day, we're going to watch within ourselves to see if we can recognize at any point selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, or fear. When any of these things creep up, first we identify them. The next thing it says, when these creep up, and focus on that word when. It doesn't say if. They're going to creep up. So when they do, we got directions of what to do with them. Before, we never had directions. I get pissed off and I get resentful. What is my direction? To lash out at you and serve justice, right? That's not what we're doing today. It says when we recognize it, first thing we do, we're going to ask God at once to remove them. That's the first thing we do, is ask God to remove it. And let's notice the time reference in these things. When do we do it? It says here, at once. As soon as we recognize it, at once we're going to ask God to remove it. That is direction number 1. Direction number 2, we're going to discuss with somebody immediately. When? Immediately. I'm asking God to remove this selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, or fear. Ask him to remove it, and then I'm going to talk to somebody about it. Mentor is probably a good person, but anybody. Why? Because we've already learned that it's just like, look at this. The first part of this is we're going to watch for it. That's step 4, right? We're looking for these things: selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear. The next thing is we ask God to remove it. That's step 6 and 7. Asking God to remove it. The next thing we're going to discuss with somebody. That's step 5. And then it says we make amends quickly. Well, there's step 8 and 9. We're doing 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 every day now. We're going to make amends when? Quickly. Again, the time reference. At once, immediately, quickly. That's the third thing we do, is we make amends. What's the last thing we do? We resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Well, there's step 12. That's the AA way of living. Now, here's the interesting thing with this. If this is going to be my way of life, I can sit down, as I had done when I first started studying this stuff, and I could do as a lot of you are doing, making notes. And then we're going to move on to the next chapter, and we're going to move on to the next chapter. And my question to you is the same question I had to ask for myself when I realized that, I'm making my amends, and now I get pissed off or fearful or whatever it is. What do I do about that? This needs to become a working part of my mind. If I'm going to live like this, I'm going to at least first, before it can become habitual and become a working part of my mind, I'm going to need to memorize this. What am I looking for? Because I tell you what, if you don't know the 4 things you're looking for, you sure in the hell aren't going to know what to do about it. You ought to know what we're looking for. Memorize. Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear. What are the 4 things I do about it? Memorize. Now, on our website, 1939aa.com, we have a I only had this before for step 10, 11, but I've expanded it now for each one of the steps. In the document section for step study documents, step 10, it has these directions on there. So you can use it as a cheat sheet to memorize. Start memorizing the directions for this. It's important. I mean, you can't live it if you don't know what it is. So you sit, this brings me to, you sit down at a meeting, a different meeting than this, maybe, more of a modern day AA meeting. Anybody have a topic? Yeah, let's talk about step 10. Okay. How do you do step 10? And you'll be amazed to know that at least 9 out of 10 people have no idea. Well, the way I do it is, oh, well, that's not what this one says. So we know that this is the AA program of recovery. What program of recovery are you doing? Just so everybody knows. We don't want to mislead them that what you're saying is the AA program of recovery, because what you're saying can kill other people, right? If they're trying to practice the AA program of recovery, we better be giving them the AA program of recovery. If you want to do it another way and it works for you, that's fine. And if you're interested in what he's doing, just understand you want to start working Jeff's program of recovery. And it might work for you. I don't know. You got one case that says it's working. Here we've got many thousands that says rarely has anyone failed. So we just need to make sure that we're very clear and focused on it. I don't go to other meetings often. And if I do, it's not to argue in that way. It's not in the spirit of arguing. It's in the spirit of, I don't want to see somebody new who really does want help. And those, honestly, and we've talked about this before, experience is few and far between that are really willing to go to any lengths in order to get over drinking. But if you get that one person who is, and he's really looking for help and he's getting misguided, it's our responsibility to point that out, period. And I don't care if I hurt your feelings, because I did the same thing. Number one, I misled people, not knowingly, good intentions. I just didn't know this information, number one. And number two, I was misled for a long time, and it kept me sick for over a decade. Sober, because that's what we were told we needed to do, is be sober. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that people understand these clear-cut directions. And the way you're going to do that is by memorizing this. You can't do it if you're not memorizing it. All right, so enough on that. I just seem to think that that's important. Love and tolerance of others, that's going to be our code. All right, I am going to go on to this last piece because we just learned everything in step 9 about, and we learned what to do in step 10. But step 9, the promises told us how our life looks being manageable now, right? We've had a spiritual experience. We have recovered. Now our life's manageable. That's what they just explained to us. Well, what about the drinking problem? Now we're going to show here something we don't see very often because they don't read this in the promises, but this is promises part 2. And this is the promises of what happens with the drinking part when we're recovered. What happens with that failure to reflect on the consequences? And I pick up what happens to that. We'll get this. Bottom of page 84. And we've ceased fighting anything or anyone. We learned that's because of resentment. Even alcohol, we're not fighting. For by this time, sanity will have returned. Oh, step 2, when they're talking about coming to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity, we learned that the insanity was that thinking that happens right before we pick up the first drink. That was a form of mental illness, insanity. What happened now? Sanity got returned. Nowhere in here does it say sanity gets returned. All it says is that we come to believe that a power can restore it. Well, here it's saying by step 9, your sanity has been restored. What does that look like? We're seldom interested in liquor. And even if we're tempted, we're going to recoil from it as from a hot flame. Remember, we learned the insanity was with the hot stove. You put your hand on it, you burn yourself. Why would you ever do it again? But that's what we do. Now it says we are going to always recoil from it as from a hot flame. It says that is reacting sanely and normally. And we find that this has happened automatically, not by shielding ourselves from alcohol. This happens automatically from doing what we've done. We will see that our new attitude towards liquor has been given us without any thought and without any effort on our part. That's why we've never focused on alcohol in any of these steps. It didn't give us directions to stay away from people who drink, stay out of bars, don't have alcohol in your house. We didn't learn nothing of any of that. Nothing about alcohol other than what the problem is. And the reason we didn't learn how to combat it is because right here it says we don't. It's going to happen automatically. If you remember, it said when we straighten up the spiritual problem, we will automatically straighten up physically and mentally. The alcohol problem. It's been given without any thought on our part. It just comes, and that's the miracle of it. Underlying, we're not fighting it. And we're not even avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn it off. Instead, highlight and underlined, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. The mental insanity problem has been removed. The alcoholic mind that we have, it's been removed. Well, that almost sounds like cured, doesn't it? Been removed? Well, let's read on. But it does say that that problem has been removed. We're neither cocky nor are we afraid, and this is our experience. Oh, wait a minute. It says this is how we react. This is how we're going to continue to react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. Sounds like we got a caveat here. If we want to stay in this condition, sounds like there's some things we're going to need to do. And what is it? Fit spiritual condition. What is it to be in fit spiritual condition? Living the AA way of life, step 10, 11, and 12 is what keeps us in fit spiritual condition. As long as we do that, we will continue to feel the promises of how we feel, and we will continue to experience this problem of the alcohol being removed. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Look, the whole thing here. This is like one of the only conditions, illnesses that I'm aware of, that you're going to come out of this thing on the other side better than you were when you went in. I mean, like if you get cancer, you might go into remission, but you come out so much better than when you went in. I mean, you don't have cancer, but this doesn't say, oh, well, the alcohol problem's gone. That's what's gone if you just stop drinking and stay sober. But this saying you're going to come out feeling better, your whole life is going to be better, and the alcohol's not even a problem. You're going to react walking away from it as if it's from a hot flame. It doesn't mean alcohol's bad, and it's not. Just for me, it's poison. I know that. You know, I could look at it as a normal person would look at bleach. You know, really use a glass of that. Nobody thinks like that, right? They're going to somebody puts in front, you're going to recoil from it as from a hot flame. That's what we do with alcohol. It's fine for you. It's not for me. It's easy to let up on our spiritual program of action and rest our laurels. This is what they're talking about with fit spiritual condition. Why would it be easy to let up on our spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels? Because you just read the promises. Life's feeling really good. And when life starts feeling really good, do I really need to be doing all this? I mean, life's good now. Of course, we're willing to go to any lengths when we get here because we got the heat on our back, you know, we're dead earnestness to stop this, get control of this drink problem. But now life's good. It becomes easy to let up on the spiritual program. And I have seen this happen over and over and over again. Seeing somebody go through all this work to step 9 with the men's and everything, and life just starts getting great, and they get their life just gets in order. Work, within their household, everything just starts getting straight. Life is good. And I don't need to get a whole lot better. I don't have time to be working with other people, you know. I don't need to get better. This isn't about being better. This is about keeping in fit spiritual condition. Just to keep what we have to do work. It's not about getting to get better. So says it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action if we rest on our laurels. We're headed for trouble if we do, because alcohol is a subtle foe. And here's the next thing you want to underline and highlight. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve that is going to be contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Get that? Get a daily reprieve. God will provide what we need, the daily reprieve, contingent on our spiritual condition, which is what do? We keep close to him and perform his work well. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into our activities, not my will, God's will. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. If they must go with you constantly, you probably won't want to memorize that prayer. Your will be done, not mine. We can exercise our willpower along this line, all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. And with that, we will stop for